So, I recently got a new phone and have been getting it set up with my old apps. However, my planner app is no longer available. To be fair, it was Star Trek themed, so there's probably some copyright issue, but I still needed something to help keep track of appointments and to-do lists. I tried to find a simple planner app and I couldn't find anything that was actually simple. A lot of the apps I found try to sync with Google Calendar, which often has stuff I don't need and I don't have full control over it. Many apps set reminders as default or otherwise have a ton of unnecessary settings that I found I had to turn off each time I added something, or just really clunky interfaces that take forever to set up. Plus, many of the features were not optional, and I found they blocked the functionality I was looking for. And don't even get me started on the pop-up ads. A lot of this stuff comes down to the idea of productivity, that you need to schedule every second of your life to maximize output. However, that doesn't always work, at least not for everyone. I personally find some tasks easier to get around to if I don't set aside a specific time. That way, I use the time I would spend thinking about when I want to do that task actually doing it. Basically, people are complicated, and a lack of flexibility in app design can easily backfire. In the case of these not so simple planners, I find these features add nothing but clutter and confusion to something that should be easy. This is why I really liked my old planner. I'd press one button, set a day, and type whatever reminder I needed. I could add more notes underneath if needed, which was great for a grocery list, and I didn't have to set a specific time for it. And if I didn't get a task done, the reminder would roll over to the next day, ensuring that I didn't forget, which is great for things like personal projects to be scheduled when you have time. Now, I know there's probably some perfect app out there. However, I also want to learn some skills, and I mean, I know how to code some basic stuff in C and Python. I even made an app once. It didn't work, but details. I've decided to try to code up a custom planner for myself that meets my needs. Simple, with as few bells and whistles as possible. To keep me motivated, I have set this as a 1 month project and will make a video on the process. It won't be perfect and might even crash and burn, but that's how you learn. So, let's make it. Alright, so this is the initial interface for Visual Studio 2022. Um, I'm actually re-recording this because there was some issues. I did not realize how long it would take for the emulator to load, so you'll see that in a moment. But essentially, this is the same thing you would see when opening Visual Studio. Well, sort of. I've filtered specifically for Android platforms, as that is the phone we'll be using for this project. Um, Now, when I was first researching this stuff before I started, just to make sure that this was feasible, or at least in theory, a lot of the notes said that the best thing for Visual Studio Android applications is Xamarin. This this, however, is not loaded into Visual Studio 2022 on default, at least the version that I have, except for specific folders such as this F# one, which is not what we're looking for. What I have later discovered is that Xamarin and all those links were specifically for Visual Studio 2019, and it has since been updated to what is called .NET MAUI, which is this application here. So this is the template that I have selected. I'd save that, and once finished, this is the default page, which will essentially have which essentially creates a default program, which you will see in a moment. Alright, this should be showing stuff now. I would, yeah, the actual running this thing took way longer than I expected, so I've cut this down for time, but this is the default MAUI interface thing that Visual Studio 2022 has. So essentially a picture, some words, and a button that you can click and it counts. This is the default. I will now attempt to redo this to create the interface I'm looking for, at least in terms of the visual design, and I will be back soon. Okay, this is a midway through the process thing. Basically, this is sort of the interface I'm looking to create. Basically, the main thing I thought of when I was making this was that if I put all the buttons at the bottom, the menu buttons would kind of get in the way, and I might accidentally hit delete on something that I really need. So I moved them to the side, which is actually how they were in my old app. Probably explains why. But basically there are three main functions: create an event, delete an event, and get more details. And then a screen with all the events and selecting them basically so that you can delete or add details essentially. So that's the interface idea. Now for what it actually looks like right now. So yeah, even this took quite a bit. I had to figure out how to do the double grid function in there, which I will show in a moment. However, you might notice headings aren't exactly lined up, so it's a mess. Took about half an hour to get this far, so fun. But I think once we get this, the main thing will just be the functionality, which will probably be harder, but this is all one day and I have a month, so I'm still somewhat optimistic. So yeah, I'll see you when I have this mess fixed. Wow, so this is after about half an hour of constantly trying to reload because the emulator kept crashing. Yikes. This is... I think from now on my plan is going to be to plan for to do housework while this thing loads because that took forever. Probably not going to continue to try and reshuffle things on, and show things constantly, but we'll see how things work out. It's definitely going to take a lot longer than I thought just because this thing is really slow. Even with a computer that's actually really good and, it's just not sure if this is a Visual Studio thing or what, but maybe I configured my emulator wrong. I don't know, but oh boy. Well, it's been about half an hour of more moving things around, but I think I've got the basic idea of the interface done. Mostly the issue now would be spacing, but that can be solved with some row definitions, which I'll show in a moment. But basically, we now have new delete and details set up with two events sort of pseudo created. Also gonna have to get rid of this button because that's not going to be in the final thing. So yeah, I'll just, I find that I have to close this instead of power off. While power off would seem to help, it means that when it comes back it'll be powered off and you have to turn it back on so it'll look like it's failed. Yeah, so just click the little X here, and okay, and this is the code right now. So this stuff is just default stuff. I didn't change any of that. Vertical stack layout sets the main screen, and then I have a grid with two columns, one set at 90 and one set at automatic. So the left column is the event buttons, and the right column is the events itself. I've tried to do the comments. It keeps giving me errors whenever I do that. I'll have to figure that out as well. But for the events, I put a grid within the grid to make sure that it got spaced out correctly, with essentially three rows, where you have the first button has grid row 0, and
course, counter buttons, and actually this is probably where I need to, no, that would be the height, so that wouldn't actually change anything. And these are all just the default stuff from the button at the bottom, which I'll delete right now. And so yeah, so button, it just goes to the clicker function, which is in this section. I'll hop to that in a moment. But yeah, grid rows 0, 1, and 2 for the 3 buttons, which I had to name separately so it doesn't get confused, otherwise it'll error and not work. Then for the events side of things, I have another one with similar rows and events there. And yeah, so that's the basic stuff. And on the other side, there's this, which basically just initiates all this stuff and does the counter clicking function, which is all default from before when it was the other default app thing. So I think that's all I had for the thing until I get the interface set up, or sorry, I have the interface set up. I need to get the data stuff set up, the event thingy. I don't really know what to call it, but the functional part, I guess you could say. So yeah, that will be probably a project for another time, for another day, because this was a lot longer than I expected, mostly because that emulator takes forever. So until then, we'll just time lapse. Well, turns out that when you close the program that this thing is currently recording, it also stops the recording. So that was good to learn, and is also why I decided to work out the next parts off screen. So the next problem that had to be tackled was essentially how to make sure the events got sorted correctly by day and time. And so I basically made a test version of the code I wanted to run in Python, since that would save me from having to wait 15 minutes every time I wanted to test anything. So this is the code, and I'll bring up the pseudocode flowchart on screen while I go through it. But basically, the idea is that for each event, you'll get the data from each list, essentially, and then you'll find and then you'll basically query through this while loop if this, basically at looking if the date of the, well, basically it runs through each event, and then it asks, is the old event newer or later than the new event? And if it's earlier, then it just keeps going and checks the next one. But if it is not before the new event, then it checks if it's on the same day, which is this next equals equals sign here. Very important that you get equals equals and not 1, because equals means assigned to, whereas equals equals is check if the same. So that's an important thing to note. And then, yeah, if it's on the same day, then it needs to check the timestamps. I put this in specifically because that way, if you have a new event that's just on a single day, you don't have to deal with this chunk of code, which should improve efficiency, because this system I have in place is terribly inefficient and probably will get yelled at about how bad it is. But yeah, the main thing right now is making it work. So not planning for big O notation or any of that specific coding stuff that people who know more about this than me know very well. Anyways, if it is on the same day, however, it basically repeats the same loop, except checking timestamps to make sure that it gets it into the correct spot, with also a specific bit of code in case it is the last event of the day. It doesn't start looking for the next day, essentially. But that's basically what this whole add event thing is for. I also have this flag thing here where if it runs through all of the day stamps and finds that it's at the end, then it also will append it at the end that way, and then we'll return. This bit down here, however, is actually the real code. It just takes it basically presets the first three events as already being there, and then it tells it to add event 4, event 5, event 6, event 7, essentially, and then you print. I'll put the results on screen. Don't want to close this thing and accidentally make it stop recording again. That's fun. So yeah, and like I mentioned, it took about 1 hour to make this program because I actually know what I'm doing in this case. That was not the case in C Sharp. So with C Sharp, I essentially made a new Visual Studio program that opens in the console, again, just because the phone app takes forever to load. So I figured it'd be easier to just quickly test, essentially try to copy over the coding. Now, C Sharp syntax is different than Python, so I had to figure out that, for instance, you have to put string with square brackets before the event name, and also that C Sharp uses curly brackets, and don't forget the semicolon. That's the big thing you learn in coding. Do not forget the semicolon. And then from there, I was able to set up an array using this type of notation for saying that it's two-dimensional essentially, and added the events in essentially a table, and was even able to print it using a for loop. Apparently, is the easiest way to do that according to the internet. So I just use that. Also, speaking of the internet, W3, I'll put the link in the descriptions. They had really good tutorials for Python and for C Sharp that I was able to use for this part of the information. However, and so basically it's how I've learned Python. The problem, however, is in terms of adding stuff to the arrays. This was not in the tutorial, and I found out, at least according to the internet, that arrays get weird when it comes to doing this. Like, they have a fixed size, and so you can't really add things, even though things like lists have .append and similar functions to what we used in the Python code. Now, this is where we run into kind of the issue that I've had in general with C and coding in general, is that a lot of the information is it's not geared towards beginners, I find, where it's, well, in this case specifically, most of the advice on how to append an array was, don't, just use lists and don't use multidimensionals, which doesn't really help. It took about an hour of a lot of frustrated searching, and I still haven't found anything yet. So I've kind of given up on this, and instead I'm going to use a slightly weird workaround, I guess, where I will be using a list, essentially, and then because each event will be specifically broken up into 4 categories, date, time, heading, and notes, then I'll just use those as entries and just go with and make a function that will calculate, for instance, entry 2 becomes entry 8, and then you get 8, 9, 10, 11 sort of a thing. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how it works, but that will be in the next code once I update this thing, and hopefully it works. So we'll see you then. That took way longer than I thought it would, or reasonably even should. Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of the info online is very difficult. The main issue is with most online research is knowing what the right question is to ask. Yeah, a lot of the info about lists gave conflicting information that often wouldn't compile. It was a lot, and I basically had to stop for a while because I was getting really frustrated, but I finally got it. As you can see on here, I've got the original list, and I've got it to add a new event. So now I can finally progress with sorting these things. But yeah, if you look at the code right now, okay, yeah, so basically the same setup as before in terms of the strings. Turns out you don't need to change that. The thing you do need is this list string statement for your array, or list now, which is what allows you to append stuff, not the not square brackets. You apparently can't do that if it has square brackets, I think. Again, it's very difficult to find information or accurate information. Just yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, after you've gotten the new list string inputted, if that's a word, you can then add range and add lists to your list. Then for printing, I've done, like I mentioned, essentially break it up into sections of four, where, and then just use another counter to make your to make it all work, and then you just take that and have 0, 1, 2, and 3 for your lines, and from there I then just made another thing so you can add the basically add new events after that, and this is actually what we'll be changing in the next part to do the sorting. And then after that, just print the initial array, enter so you can see where it changes, and then the results. So yeah, I'm happy it's over with. But yeah, this is the big part of the learning curve, and unfortunately, a lot of the internet stuff isn't all that useful. So that's part of why I'm sort of doing this and filming it specifically, is because this has been a problem before, and it's part of why I haven't done much coding before. So hopefully this helps somewhat, or maybe let's get lost in everything else. Who knows? And this is all probably really bad in terms of, or at least inefficient. So yeah, but I've got to start now, and now the only thing will be sorting, which should be pretty easy. It's mostly just compares from the last time, assuming things work the same, which they probably won't. So that's next time's problem. See you then. Okay, some things actually did work out pretty well. Other things I had changed, so let's go through everything. The code is now working the same way that the Python script did, so I'm at least happy about that. So first of all, well, actually have to get rid of this, probably. But yeah, setting up the events, same as before, and setting up the initial array with the first 3 events, same as before. And yep, and list string is very important, so keep an eye out for that. Then have the same print function here. I don't think that's changed. So now for adding an event. Basically, comparing the old and new code, it's pretty much the same. The biggest issue is that you can't, well, see assign specific variable types, so you have like string or int, and so you have to use this parse command to make sure that you get it from string to an integer so it can be compared later. However, it doesn't always work like if you don't have a string, so the code is going to have to be very carefully make sure that these date stamps are strings or are numbers in string form. Might change some things around. Not sure how easy it'd be to include integers in a string. That's a future problem, though. We'll get to that later. But for now, the main thing is to set up a new array, make sure it's empty. This is probably redundant, but better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, and have to go through everything again, because that's always... Debugging is always the hardest part, and it's better to over-prepare and just not have to deal with that. Anyways, the other thing... So yeah, this is all pretty much the same, and the same while loop. However, again, going back to that integer string issue, for the timestamps, since it is allowed for there to be no timestamp, I found this function, the try catch is what it's called, and basically making sure that if there is no timestamp, then it'll do a format exception and just do it properly and just add the event normally, which I can go through that code quickly. It's basically the exact same thing, same while loop and everything. I did try to do it like add the chunks, but because of how the string is set up for the .add function, it doesn't work that way. Again, it's the difference between box brackets and the other type of list function, which I do not understand why they did that, but yeah, it's a problem basically, but easy enough to fix. Just use that other formatting. Let's use this system, and again, do not forget J++ or I++. Otherwise, it'll loop forever and it just won't work. Um, Beyond that, the other thing that I had trouble with was remembering to put I times 4, because again, with how the other type of list works, you can't make an array with and also add to it, so you have to do every fourth function. So just watch out for that in the code. I'm talking as though you're making this as well, which I assume you're not, but if you are, or if you're doing anything similar, just yeah, a lot of little mistakes that you can easily make and spend an entire day working on. Not that I know what that is like. I very much do. Anyways, back to the code. So yeah, basically, first it checks that I is less than the total length divided by 4, and then checks the timestamp for each time, and then checks if it's the same day, and if basically greater than versus equals to, just as a way of so that if it's basically just some efficiency, so that if it's a different day, then you don't have to go through this entire section of code that we're about to go through. But if it is on the same day, you check if there is a time, and then just keep looping until you find a timestamp that is greater than, essentially, and add the event. And wait, why is oh yes, I was confused by this, so I should probably explain that better and probably add it in more detail in the comments. But basically, it's checking that if you're basically well, yeah, basically the if the next day is the same as the current one, then it will add things. I might have to go back and change this. I'll double check that it's working. Might have made a mistake there. But yeah, basically same code, copy pasted a bunch of times. Could have probably made that a function, but that could also introduce more issues. So for prototyping, it's better sometimes to just write it all out and then clean it up afterwards, especially if you're new to this, because it can get buggy if you try and take the proper shortcuts. So yeah, and then basically just checking and then checking if there's a new event, and then at the end, adding like if it's not been added yet, then you add it to the end, and then after that, you clear the old data and paste in the new data. Just makes it easier. And then the rest of this is all the same. So when you run the thing, which will not show up on here probably, so I'll stop recording and just start again. This is definitely need to work out these bugs as well. We're back. So yeah, when you're done, then you get a bunch of little, yeah, basically the sorted list. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll just switch back to the other screen for a moment. Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping stuff. I've had some stuff come up in my day job and like personal stuff. Um, it's been most of a month, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to actually get to what I hope for of finishing this project in the month of February. Um, and like failure, I set out making this project with the idea that failure is always an option. However, I meant that more in terms of the spectacular crash and burn sort of failure that I expected to have happen, but this feels kind of anticlimactic. And since I set the rules, I'm going to change them. Basically, since I've also, well, learning C, learning how to record, and I still have to animate all this stuff, which I've also not done before, I figure this is technically two projects, so I'll do it over 2 months. Give myself an extra month to make sure I can get as much of the code actually working properly in the app as I can, so I have something that's actually interesting for a conclusion. Um, Not sure if I'm going to keep that format of every 2 months, especially seeing as I kind of don't have an idea of my next project right now. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out. Yeah, I guess that's it for housekeeping. And the next step will be to implement this in the app. I'll probably just first do the code and see if it works and prints out the information, and then I'll figure out how to make the new events, these event 4, event 5 stuff, actually be from the app interface, and how that works, which is going to be its own project. Until then, I'll see you in the next update. Wow, I thought this would only be 10-15 minutes at most, and we're at 30 minutes. I just finished editing, and yeah, it's surprising, I guess. I've also been reflecting on my experience with this project while I've been editing and just think about it in general this last week, and I've learned a lot about myself and what I want this channel to be, I think. I've realized that I've definitely bitten off more than I can chew with this project. While I've done C coding before, I've never done arrays or app design in Visual Studio, um, and expecting to do all of that in 1 month, plus learning to film, learning to edit, all this stuff was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I guess I'm just used to seeing it be easy for other people, and yeah. But it's also kind of feeling like my other project ideas weren't good enough, I guess. Just simple things with no practical use, really. But I've also found that I'm kind of hard on myself when it comes to these things, much more than I realized. Even editing this has really surprised me. I mean, I still maintain that expecting comments yelling at me about how ridiculous this code is being optimistic, because I mean, in in all likelihood, this channel will probably stay small for some time, and that's pretty much normal. But either way, the main thing that I've learned is that I think I went into this project with the idea more of impressing other people and like employers and stuff with something that's useful. But that's not what I intended with this channel when I first set out with this idea. It's more I I more wanted this to be a place for me to be weird and just make funny things. And that's some and that in thinking about this app and what's happened this last month, I don't think this is a failure anymore. No, it's not a working app, but it's a video. Like, somehow, without meaning to, I've sort of stumbled backwards into learning how to make a video and what I want out of these videos. And that's basically the whole point of the unofficial motto I've made for this channel. Failure is always an option. Sure, I failed to make an app, but I've learned so much from this, and that's the whole point of trying, is to learn. Anyways, enough with the philosophical musings. What does this mean going forwards? Well, I'm not done with this app. I'm probably going to do some more work in the background and either make a part 2 once I've gotten more experience with C and how lists and stuff work, or I'll make this into a long-term project that will pop up occasionally between short-term videos, just sort of updating as I figure things out. I am, however, going to try and keep that 1 month upload schedule I initially planned and just do something fun each time. I think I've come up with some ideas for simple things, probably mostly in Python to start. Um, I'm considering getting some Arduino stuff, but that'll depend on like shipping and all that stuff. So we'll see. But next month will be some Python nonsense that I think will be fun. So with all that out of the way, I will see you next month with a new video. I also should make an outro at some point. Put that on the to-do list. Well, I would, except I don't have one because I haven't finished this app. Bye.